Media missed add-ons. Let's kick it off. We live in a really strange time right now. Mark Zuckerberg claims to have a change of heart all of a sudden, and he no longer supports censorship. He's pretending to be, or we'll be nice. We'll say he's now all of a sudden an advocate for free speech. Joining me to discuss, Mike Benz. He's the executive director for the Foundation for Freedom Online. And Mike, I'm glad to have you here today because I saw the video he posted on X. We're going to play a clip from it in just about a couple of seconds. But I'm a little hesitant, and I'm not very I'm not really buying what he's selling right now. So for our audience, in case you guys missed it at home, let's play that clip of Mr. Zuckerberg saying he is now an advocate for free speech.
But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
All right, Mike, I'm not sure if I'm buying what he's selling. It does sound pretty genuine though. What do you think of all of this?
Let's go. I actually was looking around looking for my Trump wine. I'll tell you, I have a little bit of a different take on this. I agree with you insofar as you can't really trust Zuckerberg because he does not have the characteristic of bravery that is necessary for you to really depend on someone's word. But I actually think this has been a long, long time coming. I remember when Zuckerberg complained about too much censorship on Facebook in 2019 and was already signaling publicly in public speeches that he wanted to remove many of the hate speech provisions that were at that point already targeting hundreds of thousands of users on Facebook and was generating user pushback. But what happened next was a campaign called hashtag Change the Terms hit Facebook. It cost Facebook $60 billion, billion with a B, in market cap in just a few weeks. And so Zuckerberg, fearing for the financial safety of the platform, gave Change the Terms everything they asked for and externally delegated so much of its censorship infrastructure to these third-party groups, incorporated all the changes in the algorithms that were requested just to make the pain stop. You saw a similar thing flare up in 2021 with the COVID censorship. Zuckerberg did not want to censor user claims on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp about man-made COVID-19 issues, origins around COVID-19, but he was told by his global policy director, Nick Clegg, who was the former deputy prime minister of the UK, who wrote the book How to Stop Brexit after Brexit already happened and encouraged people to join Keir Starmer's Labour Party, the man who is now arresting thousands of people in the UK for memes and clicking the retweet button. But Nick Clegg convinced Mark Zuckerberg, in emails we now have because of Jim Jordan, that Zuckerberg needed to censor everything the Biden administration asked for because we have bigger fish to fry on multiple policy fronts with the Biden administration. So we should think creatively about ways to be receptive to the Biden administration's demands for censorship. And Zuckerberg pleaded with Clegg and said, can we at least tell the public that we're only doing this because the government told us to? And it appears the answer to that was no. So Zuckerberg sat on that for 2 years until there was a little bit of political safety. And I think, frankly, until Facebook had had enough because they felt betrayed by the Biden administration not fighting for them against the EU Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act. So it's a long way of saying I actually think Zuck does believe this, and he does have an ideological affinity with Elon Musk in that way. But at the same time, there is a moment where it's easier to do this now. In fact, it's politically beneficial. And so he can sort of get what he wanted before, but not have to take the risks that he did before, because now You have these hard-charging heads of the FCC in Brendan Carr. You have these hard-charging heads of the FTC and Andrew Ferguson. You have a Justice Department that is now, going to be totally flipping the other way, and you have a new State Department who is going to be aggressive about taking on foreign governments coercing censorship. And so all of these factors have shifted. So I think it's safe to sort of come out as a libertarian now in a way that was not before.
Yeah, and to be fair, too, to add to your point, when President Trump went through his first assassination attempt, I know Mark Zuckerberg said that he did reach out to President Trump to have a conversation with him, and that was a big motivator for him to jump on board as well. So hopefully he sticks to his word. But there's 6 key things that he's now changing. He's not doing the fact checkers anymore. He's moving to community notes. He's going to be getting rid of a lot of the restrictions for terms like gender or immigration terms, which is also really important because, transgender terms are constantly nuked by conservative voices who are speaking on their platform. And there's other things too, like he's going to be working with the Trump administration to make sure that countries aren't bullying American countries, which is going to be good for countries, for those in Brazil, at least I should say, because we all know that this Brazilian Supreme Court loves to bully American companies into censorship. So I am a little optimistic about this too. So let's hope he sticks to his word. But Mike, I have to ask you, because you did a great job at analyzing the footage of the pipe bomber that was released by the FBI magically. Just a couple of days ago, they found footage that they were able to release to us. And you notice there's a lot of editing being done to this footage. And it's really hard for folks like myself to run it through any type of program to maybe get some biometrics or any information off of it from that angle. What did you find from this video that you thought was concerning?
Well, it's actually the original footage. I've been sitting on this for several
Oh.
years. This is in March 2021 and then September 2021. The FBI released two different cameras from the DNC pipe bomb site, and this is what you see here is what I call camera one. This is the and I'll be releasing later this week the same eye blur they did to camera two, but.
Mhm.
There has been the FBI. I always say the FBI is where evidence goes to die. They are professional evidence destroyers. I think anyone who has seen what has happened in any high profile case where there's a whiff of government corruption or inside job or cover up, they have done this every time, all the time. You want to go back to Oklahoma City and all 22 video cameras being destroyed so that there was no way for Jesse Trentadue to be able to get those in discovery. You want to go back to the Jeffrey Epstein 2 security cameras being destroyed, the visitor logs being ripped out and non-recoverable. There's so many it'll make your head spin. But when I was very deep in the pipe bomb research events right after that happened, I was going through these pipe bomb videos. There were only 2 that were released, and the FBI just released a new video, basically for the first time in 3 years. That FBI page had not been updated since September 2021. But in both of the DNC camera footage, now remember, Watergate happened in this country because the DNC headquarters building was broken into. And yet somehow both of the DNC security camera footages were nuked down to 1 frame per second. That is 30 times less than the average 7-Eleven. And this is the party headquarters of the DNC. So it's very obvious that the frame rate was deliberately nuked before being made public. Now, likely the FBI sent this, they took the footage, as they always do in every investigation. They take all the original footage from all the locations. It's likely that someone at the FBI handed off the footage to a third-party contractor for processing, so that there's some level of plausible deniability that it didn't happen in-house at the FBI. They can always claim an error occurred at third-party offsite. And then that was reduced down to 1 frame per second. Interestingly, this first one in this video was not, but that was when it was far away. It was before the DNC sites were nuked down to 1 FPS. Now, the nice thing about reducing it to 1 frame per second is not only do you have far less information than if it was published in its original form, which would be somewhere between 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second, continuous motion. But that means they only had to blur the eyes on about 4 frames instead of about 120 frames or 240 frames and making those minor little adjustments every little time to the eye to the eye blur. But understand, the pipe bomber was wearing transparent glasses, which meant if a camera that is 20 feet away, you would be able to zoom in and see it. I remember when I first went into that footage and I went through all the FBI files that had been released on the pipe bomber, and I brought them into 100x zoom, 1000x zoom in the software I have. And I remember finally when I got to that frame on the park bench, I thought, we're going to get this guy. We're going to get the irises. And once you have the eyes, you can run that into facial recognition. You can do biometric scanning. If that person ever was in the U.S. military, their eyes would show up in a database. If that person ever had committed a felony, that person's eyes would be in a database. And if this person is out there planting pipe bombs, there's a very good chance that either they had a criminal record, in which case we'd be able to ID them from their eyeballs, or they were a former U.S. service person who knows how to make a pipe bomb. But amazingly, the only moment of horizontal blur bar activity is when that person's eyes are available, both in the 4 frames here and in the 3 frames from the second camera footage. So it's very evident to me, beyond the nuking of the frame rate, that they actually intentionally did not want the public to be able to see the eyes, because that would allow you to run those irises in a database and come up with a list of potential people. You could narrow it down to just a few potential suspects. And whether or not this pipe bomber was him or herself a federal agent or federal informant, it's quite possible that they were not, but that they were instructed to do so by a federal informant or a federal agent, just like in the Whitmer Fednapping plot, which involved dud pipe bombs, just like in the 3 Percenters case in 2017, which involved dud pipe bombs, just like as their favorite thing to do is get people to make dud pipe bombs. And so if you know the suspect, then the criminal proceeding proceeds to the network. And if it turned out the FBI had advanced awareness of the pipe bombs being planted, that completely inverts, not just stops the January 6th narrative. It completely inverts it, because the whole thing, this was the major mass casualty event threat of the entire day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the big issue with this. And, they always sit here. I was watching all these corporate media outlets. I think it was the day before, so January 5th, push up the fact that the FBI is still looking for this individual and they're still floating that $500,000 reward. But we all know that's not what they're actually looking for. And I just did the story too recently about New Orleans, the terrorist who had that horrific attack on New Year's Day. The FBI showed up to his home in Houston, and like you said, went through the evidence, and left some things behind. But given the fact that it's an Islamic motivated crime, why would you leave behind a Quran, any material related to religion? His laptop is still present. You see that in the video footage taken by the New York Post journalist. And the FBI didn't give me a response after I asked them specifically about that. They went over to other things and tried to distance themselves from the evidence question. But then they later, according to people, might have just showed back up. This is according to the Harris County deputies. They went back to the scene, shut down the crime scene again. And we don't know if the FBI actually showed up again, but it sounds like that they did, because they had those deputies go there for a reason to close it down. So again, it's like the FBI trying to initially bury a lot of evidence, a lot of key facts in all of this, and it creates more confusion and chaos than transparency, what they claim to be all about these days. So I think the only way we get these answers, though, in regards to the pipe bomber, Mike, is if we finally get some answers through an FBI director. Maybe Kash Patel could finally get to the bottom of this. Are you confident that Kash Patel would prioritize this and be able to get to the bottom of it?
It's possible. It's also possible, and if not outright probable, that the key evidence has been completely destroyed forever. For example, it would be hard for me to imagine if you were to get the original source footage that the DNC security cameras actually recorded, and that were to be public, and you could actually see the eyeballs and ID the suspect. We know from the weaponization subcommittee that it was narrowed down to a single suspect. It was something like 800 potential suspects, or 150 or something, and then it was narrowed down, and then FBI agents were waved off the trail once they had a Metro card and a license plate number. And so, I mean, it's very obvious what's happening here. The pipe bomb event, the first pipe bomb was discovered at 12:48 p.m., which was 12 minutes before the the certification. Just 1 minute later is when the perimeter breach on the Penn Walkway entrance to the Capitol started. And so it was the breach was timed to the minute with the discovery of the pipe bomb. Stephen Sund, the Capitol Police Chief, even personally said he believed that the pipe bombs were planted as a way to as a diversion so that Capitol Police resources significantly underappreciated the threat that was happening actually at the perimeter, because the much more proximal and dangerous threat was a mass casualty event happening just a few blocks over. And so they diverted resources. They were triaging. So the already understaffed area was tending to the pipe bomb rather than to the actual activity involving the breach. And so it's very clear this was if it turns out that this is just like the Whitmer case, it's just like the Tear Up Texas, Garland, Texas case, it's just like countless others before, Reed Terror Factory by Trevor Aronson, what they were doing all over the GWAT era. If it's just an ordinary course FBI operation, well, then the entire insurrection becomes a Fedsurrection in one still footage frame of a camera that we may never see.
Yeah, well, I hope we do. I hope we do, Mike, because we got to get to the bottom of this, because everyone who is a part of it needs to be held accountable, but also we need to make sure it doesn't happen again, because it will if we don't hold these people accountable. Mike Benz, as always, I
was going to say, and Trump today, I should note, for the first time, publicly came out and said the FBI knows the identity of the pipe bomber and they're not telling us. So the fact that it's on Trump's mind today, I think goes a long way towards political viability to getting that evidence publicly seen.
I love to hear that. That is very, very important. Mike Benz, thank you as always. Being an independent platform is very, very expensive, because I gotta be honest with you folks, I spend about 14 hours a day doing a lot of research on these stories we bring to you, because corporate media doesn't want to talk about it, but we do here. And this show isn't accepting money from any foreign countries or corrupt corporations. It's funded by you all at home. So if you'd like to support my work as an independent journalist, we've set up a platform for you to do just that. It's supportbre.com. That's supportbre.com. That's where you can make a one-time donation or become a monthly donor. Now, the monthly donations are critical because that helps us hire staff, so we greatly appreciate it when you do just that. It's safe and secure. It's all done through DonorBox, folks, so it is very easy to do. So head on over right now to supportbre.com. That's supportbre.com right now, because we couldn't do it without you. We've told you here before that the Biden regime, they're allies to terrorists at this point. There's no other way to kind of phrase this and nicely put it. They love their terrorists. We know that our own federal government is funding terrorism, Islamic terrorism, by sending our money over to these NGOs that shifted over to, groups like the Taliban. And for some reason, there's not enough outrage behind that, which I don't understand. But then there's what's going on right now. As Joe Biden's getting ready to leave the White House, he seems to be freeing those on Guantanamo Bay. Now, you can call them terrorists, but they haven't been charged with a crime, and they've been sitting there for over 2 decades now. So it's kind of strange. So joining me to kind of walk through all of these details right now is my good friend, Mr. George Hill. He's an FBI whistleblower, and he's spent some time over in Guantanamo Bay. He spent 1 year back in 2004 over there. He was a non-commissioned officer in charge. He was also an acting officer in charge of the Saudi Arabian team. So he's got a lot of experience here. George, thank you for joining me. We're watching as reports are coming down from the Wall Street Journal that Joe Biden's he's entertaining the idea of doing a prison swap. It's allegedly for an individual who is a Bin Laden associate, and in return, he's looking to get back 3 Americans. Now, this is also on top of another report that came out that he did a transfer of 11 Yemen detainees that were also on Guantanamo Bay, including 2 former Bin Laden guards. For us at home who aren't very familiar with all of this and don't understand why this is happening, why are these individuals being freed now, and why haven't they been charged with a crime?
They were cleared for transfer over a year ago, and Biden was getting ready to move them when Hamas rolled into Israel, and it became a bad optic for the administration to make that transfer when they did. They have been engaged with the Omanis for long before that in to get them to take these Yemenis. And so when Hamas rolled into Israel, that transfer was nixed. Then as far as charging them with terrorism, and I forget what year, the Supreme Court, I'm obviously not a lawyer, but they made a mistake when they conferred constitutional protections on the detainees in Gitmo. Every one of those detainees meets the criteria of an unlawful combatant in accordance with the Geneva Convention in 1949 and the laws of land warfare. In accordance with international law, they could have been summarily executed at any given time, either while in Afghanistan or later on. They do not require a trial. Although, since we're a nation of laws, we have the Supreme Court stepping in here and, I said, conferring rights onto these individuals that they don't deserve. But if the United States has lost its stomach for summary executions, then why not just keep them locked up until old age takes over and they leave this mortal coil?
Yeah. Well, one would think that would happen. I'm always surprised when I hear that these people are still sitting on Guantanamo Bay. For those at home, I mean, we don't have really any behind the scenes look into what actually takes place on Guantanamo Bay. What are the conditions for these prisoners? And what's like, I guess, give us like kind of a walkthrough of what their everyday life might be, because we've got Americans sitting in solitary confinement here on the mainland. So I think it's interesting that they're just sitting in Guantanamo Bay waiting potentially to be charged or be shipped out somewhere else. It's so confusing to me.
So when I was there, Camp Delta was built, and they since added on to it Camp 5, which was a state-of-the-art prison that you would find in any new prison here in the United States, with community centers where they can gather, and the type of cells that one would be familiar with if they watch any kind of television. Up until that time, the hundreds of detainees were kept in these open squad bays, for lack of a better word, that the Navy Seabees built not too long after 9/11. But they get fed halal meals. They get fed out of the same dining facilities that the U.S. military eats out of. They have recreation time. They have different social clubs and reading clubs and all the kinds of things that you would find in a well-run U.S. Prison. They're in captivity. I mean, that's horrible. I mean, for any human being, but nonetheless, the conditions that they're kept under are definitely not inhumane. But the Guantanamo Bay has been a sticking point in the sides of the American left ever since it was opened. And really, it was opened for the purpose of mining and gaining an understanding of the global jihad movement. I mean, when I was there in 2004, so that was 2 years after Gitmo opened, there was no operational intelligence to be gained, but really our ignorance of radicalization and how people moved into Afghanistan to join the jihad there, how money flowed, who it came from, participation of foreign intelligence services, those kinds of things, we're all completely ignorant of. So the Saudis provided a wellspring of that. These Yemenis, on the other hand, were just hardcore jihadists. Not that the Saudis weren't, but the Saudis were predominantly unliked by the Afghanis because they were arrogant, and the only way to really read and study the Quran is in Arabic. The Afghans used to joke, how do you shut a Saudi up? You shoot them. So there was a lot to be learned in those early years. And like I said, the Supreme Court muddled things up. They are unlawful combatants and are subject to capital punishment.
Yeah, and my question for you is, often a lot of people claim that everything in regards to these detainees changed when Barack Obama was elected. Is that necessarily true, or was this going on prior to Obama's, I guess, leadership, I should say?
I'm not a big fan of Barack Obama, but they have been releasing, even in 2004 when I was there, people were leaving out of Guantanamo Bay. Obama made that horrific deal for Bo Bergdahl in exchange for those Taliban prisoners, which went on into leadership roles, actually in the Taliban right now in Afghanistan, running the show there. So this has been going on for a while. Both sides make political hay out of it. I do think that it was a good idea at the time to data mine these individuals. Remind you now that, and I participated in that as well. A lot of these people were screened on the battlefield, and people, were learning on the fly whether or not these people could have had some sort of intelligence value long term into the United States at the time called the GWAT, the Global War on Terror. So there wasn't operational intelligence to be gained. We did have one instance that involved NYPD coming down and making a positive identification on an individual. But by and large, there was no operational intelligence to be gained. In fact, the gentleman who developed the enhanced interrogation procedures came down and observed our team for almost a month on how strategic long-term interrogations should be done.
Interesting. George, do you predict now, or do you have any kind of background information, I should say, now that these individuals are being released, the 11 that were handed off to Oman, it looks like, do you think they're going to go back to terrorist activity, or do they go to a brand new life? Because I can't imagine us just handing over, well, I can, it's the Biden regime, but I can't imagine wanting to release these individuals knowing that they're going to potentially lead terror attacks against American citizens and others.
They're dedicated. A friend of mine was on the Gulf Straits team, and I'm not going to give you his name, but he spent some quality time with those individuals. I just got off the phone with him less than 30 minutes ago. These are hardcore, straight up jihadists, but they're middle-aged now. So how much trouble are they going to cause? They're probably not of the intellectual capacity of, say, a Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But no, they will more than likely go back and rejoin the jihad in some sort of leadership capacity. And, spending 20 years in Guantanamo Bay does really move them up the, I don't know, not necessarily the pecking order, but they're high priest, returning back to the jihad. They're going to be held in very high regard in that movement.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. I don't know why we allow these people to live at this point, George.
We don't have to. Legally, we don't have to. We just lost the stomach. Look, the Nuremberg trials were conducted inside of 11 months, and the Nazis executed. Here we are 20 years down the road, and we're still screwing around with this. It wasn't me who coined the term, but we're not a serious nation anymore. If we were serious about our national security, these individuals would have gotten the ghost dosed a long time ago and left the earth.
Why is it though? Why do you think this has all of a sudden changed? Because if they would have killed these people, nobody would have cared. They wouldn't have been missed by anyone. Nobody would fight for them. Nobody would care that this even took place in the first place.
As soon as you flew them into Guantanamo Bay, they became celebrities. The Red Cross got involved. The pro bono lawyers got involved. I used to give tours in my spare time of the various elements coming into Guantanamo Bay. You can't show them detainees. You can't show them images of the detainees because that's banned under the Geneva Convention. But we would still give tours of the facilities and detainee handling measures and things of that nature. And, we just, it was a good idea at the time that became a bad idea almost overnight.
Yeah. It's infuriating to see play out. And I really hope that that they don't take advantage of their freedom and they don't take advantage of the fact that they're now being released.
I would count on they're going to take advantage of it. Just count on it.
Yeah. Well, we know that our federal government, George, and you and I have these conversations too, that our federal government just doesn't care about securing our safety anymore. And I actually want to ask you too about New Orleans before you go, because I don't want this to die out in the headlines, because it seems like everyone's just moved on from the story. But we talked to Kyle Seraphin yesterday, and I specifically was asking about the evidence that was left behind in the home of the Houston home of the terrorists, the Quran, other Islamic material, a Bible, a laptop, all left behind by the FBI initially. And then a local news reporter told I guess, reported on X that the house was then closed off by local county sheriff department. And then I reach out to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office tells me that no, it's actually the FBI who's still running the investigation. So he has no comment on it. So that tells me that the FBI might have went back to collect more evidence. Why do you think the agency would leave things behind that would explain motive?
Because we need a narrative, don't we?
Yeah.
They did the same thing after January 6th. They created this narrative, this vast network of right-wing individuals that were seeking to overthrow, quote, our democracy, and they need the same thing here. And they left the Quran open to the scariest passage that somebody could find, and left this static display out. Looks eerily familiar to what they did at Mar-a-Lago, laying all the documents out to be photographed. I do not chalk it up to incompetence. Not a big fan of what the FBI has devolved into. Had a front row seat, but they're not that incompetent, so I'm not buying it. It's a narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. And the fact that they came out and they had their FBI agent, the one with the nose piercing, come out and say that this wasn't a terror event initially. And then they had to change that and quickly issue a statement on X saying that it was being looked into as potentially one, knowing that there was an ISIS flag in the truck. I think, George, it tells me that they don't want to relate this to Islam. Oh, and also I left this part out too. 2 weeks prior, on December 14th, the White House put out a whole plan on how to combat Islamophobia and how to combat the anti-Arab narrative that's taking over our country. So their priorities are very questionable at this point.
Yeah. One last thing. I know you're short on time, but
Yeah, no.
Kash Patel is probably going to be the likely next director of the FBI, and it's not rumored, but that he plans on making some major structural changes to the FBI. This also serves the purpose of cutting him off at the knees, saying, don't you be making any changes. These bad Islamists are still out there. So they're also using it preemptively as well. So yeah, it's a hot mess.
It is, and Kash Patel has his work cut out for him. I couldn't imagine anyone wanting that job, honestly. It's such a mess. It's intentional at this point, but it would be good if he brought back our favorite group of the Suspendables to help him out. I gotta say, that would be ideal for me. It would be nice.
Nobody in the Suspendables is political. We're just
I know.
patriots. We just want to see the Constitution and the restoration of the rule of law. That's all we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. But somehow that's politics these days, though. Anyone who thinks highly of this country it's crazy. Somebody told me I don't have it anymore because it was shredding because I had to take it down. I'll put it up later again, though. I had the American flag in my car and they're like, oh, we know that you're conservative. I mean, that's how crazy things have become in this country. So, George, we'll see how it all plays out. I'm hopeful, though, that Kash Patel will be confirmed and he will make the changes that need to be made. We're hoping to improve the FBI because we can't really dismantle it. It's not a very popular idea. I know a lot of people would love to do that, but so we got to fix these issues, and there's a lot to be fixed.
Yeah, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, okay?
You got that right, George. George Hill, thank you as always. Okay, if you're going to take advice from me, any advice, you got to trust me when it comes to steaks. I'm a great selector of steaks. And I just found, and I can't stop bragging about it, an incredible American Wagyu company that delivers to your front door. And the best part too, folks, they come from the great state of Missouri. They are American Wagyu products delivered to your front door. It's over at ozarkwagyu.com. That's ozarkwagyu.com. And there's a sale going on right now. I've already indulged. I've already made a couple of purchases this far, but you're going to want to head on over there because, well, you could use the promo code BREE on top of those sale prices, and it's an incredible deal. So head over to ozarkwagyu.com, take a look around. The chuck roast is amazing. New York strip is amazing as well. Filet mignons, love it. I told you guys I sent this to my producer for Christmas. So head on over, ozarkwagyu.com, promo code BREE, that's promo code BRE. It's grass-fed, no mRNA jabs at all, of course, and it is an incredible product delivered to your front door. And it's also, you guys always say, support local. This is owned by a family. A family owns this farm, and they're just shipping to anywhere in the country. And the shipping is incredible, too. So head over to ozarkwagyu.com and use promo code BREE to save. A movement we could all get behind. Abolish the ATF. I know all of you at home are on board already. just those three simple words. Joining me now to discuss the man who's reintroducing that piece of legislation. Please welcome to the show, Congressman Eric Burlison, the great state of Missouri. Congressman, I'm very excited to have you on today, and I'm very excited that you're reintroducing this piece of legislation because I know my audience isn't a fan of the ATF because we're well aware at the the Second Amendment, I should say, violations that have gone on with this agency and how rogue they've gone. So break this all down for us. What is this legislation going to do, and do you think you have the support to get it through Congress?
Yeah, it's a very simple piece of legislation. It was originally sponsored by Matt Gaetz a couple of years ago, and I was the first co-sponsor of this bill. So when Matt resigned, I immediately reached out to him and asked if I could take up the mantle on this one, and he graciously allowed me to take possession of the bill. So kudos to Matt Gaetz. But it's a very simple bill. It's a one-pager that just says the ATF is hereby abolished. And look, this is an agency that is very duplicative. They overlap in their responsibilities with a lot of other federal agencies, and then really overlap with our state and local, law enforcement officials who are the ones that actually are trying to keep us safe, right? And so the ATF, generally speaking, a lot of times they pass these stupid unconstitutional rules, like banning pistol braces, or their new rule change on making a bunch of people now have to be a gun dealer. They make these changes, and then they go and commandeer your local sheriff, your local police department, and you name it, to go and enforce these unconstitutional gun grabs. And look, what they're doing is they're taking law enforcement off the line of protecting, the citizens in the community and keeping the community safe. And instead, they're on this wild goose chase for stupid things like pistol braces. So it's an agency that has a really storied history, going back all the way to Ruby Ridge. Whenever they, in my opinion, they entrapped the individual. Then they raided his property and killed many members of his family. Then you had the Waco siege that happened that was just such an embarrassment. And then you've got the Fast and Furious incident that happened where they basically armed the Mexican drug cartels, right? Just again and again and again. And then you have this recent event in Arkansas where the individual Malinowski, who was a stand-up community leader, they commandeered local law enforcement. The ATF did, went in and raided his home, and ended up killing him. Why? Because apparently he was purchasing too many firearms. Right. So it's not about keeping people safe. It's about making it very difficult, onerous, and expensive to be a lawful, law-abiding gun owner in America. And this unconstitutional agency just needs to go away.
Yeah, Congressman, our audience agrees with you. And because we've had people like Dexter Taylor on the show. Dexter Taylor is someone right now who's actually, and sadly, is sitting in New York State prison. But it was the ATF that spotted him purchasing pieces online. And as they call it, he was creating ghost guns, and they went after him, raided his home. And all he wanted to do was he's a nerd. He wanted to learn a little bit more about building guns and wanted to do that himself at home when he's legally entitled to do that. Second Amendment allows him to do that. But sadly, New York doesn't agree with that. And it was the ATF that was the one who flagged it and put it on New York's radar for him. And they were kind of spying on him at that point, going through his credit card records and such. So this is something that's near and dear to all of our hearts. But a lot of those on the left will give a rebuttal and say that we need the ATF to kind of tell us when there's people who shouldn't be having guns in their possession, that they are having guns in their possession. And it also might fight back on terrorists and such. What kind of solution would you suggest how we fix those issues? Because it's obviously not the ATF.
Right. At the end of the day, the ATF is they're not doing a good job when it comes to stopping terrorism. They're just going after, law-abiding gun owners. But look, that job is more successfully done by other agencies like the FBI, or by and large, your local law enforcement. Again, your state highway patrol, sheriff's office, your police department. Those are the agencies that, really more responsive to the citizens. of a state and actually care about keeping their communities safe.
Yeah, and that's really important. I want to get to this because this caught my attention yesterday, and Kyle Seraphin, too, the FBI whistleblower, he forwarded this over to us. Border Patrol found an individual who was trying to bring this to Mexico. It's 2 rocket grenade launchers, and according to Kyle Seraphin, this could actually take a chopper. And so this was actually horrifying that this was made, we think was made in the United States and was making its way down to Mexico. But it's something that wasn't on our radar. And again, we don't have a secure border right now. I know yesterday the House voted on the Lakeland-Riley Act, and sadly, 159 Democrats decided not to support it. But it's important that we mention that this could have prevented Lakeland-Riley's passing if we did what we're supposed to do, and that's protect our country, protect our border, and deport those who are dangerous. You supported the Lakeland-Riley Act. Why did you support it, and how do you feel about Democrats just not jumping on board with this?
I think that they're insane. I think they've drank the Kool-Aid. And this is why they lost so many voters in the election, is that they've just gone way too far in their mentality. I mean, when you have a situation where you have people that are not only here illegally and violating our laws just to be here, but then they're committing further criminal acts while they're here, and you still don't want to deport them. Like, I don't understand, or detain them even. That's what the bill requires, is that you detain them just like you would a U.S. citizen who commits these same crimes. So there's no logical sense in why they would vote no, other than they're all still on this bandwagon of trying to play to all the woke and the critical race theory stuff. All of those things is what they're more focused on than actually being logical and keeping people safe.
Yeah. It's infuriating that we have to argue these things because it's common sense. I mean, we saw what happened in New York City to that poor woman who was sleeping in a subway with an illegal alien who I uncovered was actually sadly, he was on social services in the state of New York. And so he was receiving benefits from the state, and DHS was unaware that he was even in our country. And so we've got a lot to unpack. I know there's a lot of, I'll just go with it, rhinos who are not really that optimistic in regards to mass deportations. We keep hearing that they don't think President Trump, when he gets back into the White House, is going to be able to carry out mass deportations. How do we push forward and make sure that we are deporting these people who illegally came into our country?
I think that it is a clear priority for this administration coming in. I think that him appointing Homan, as the borders are, I think that sends a very, very clear message. When you look at all of his appointments, really, he's not playing games. Trump is, and he's learned his lesson from, having to fight the swamp years before. And I think he wants to create a legacy. So, I will feel really sorry for, anybody in my party that wants to oppose Trump's efforts to strengthen the border and deport people as was promised in the campaign. I think that we have to recognize that the American people gave him a mandate, and it's our responsibility to execute all of things that was campaigned on.
Yep. And we plan on making sure that those all do get carried out because it's really important to the American people. Congressman, thank you for joining us today. We greatly appreciate your time. I need you to stop what you're doing right this second and make sure you head on over to my Rumble page and give this show a follow. It's the Breanna Morello Show, and we're also available as a podcast as well, just in case you were wondering. You can head on over to Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all of your favorite podcasting platforms, and search the Breanna Morello Show. We are there, we are ready, and we're breaking exclusives every day, so do not miss out. Give us a follow today. Well, there's a new report that just came out in the Blaze, and it's an exclusive that you're going to want to read. It's about General Mark Milley and the Pentagon approving direct energy weapons during those June 2020 DC riots. Now, it's a very, very interesting report, given the fact that we're just learning this now. So joining me to detail what he's learning is the great reporter over at The Blaze. Please welcome to the show, Steve Baker. Steve, you've done a great job, again, uncovering something that looks like the federal government was trying to potentially agitate the already agitated crowd back in 2020 outside in DC. So break down your latest report, because We're just learning about this now because Mark Milley opened his mouth recently.
Yeah, he did. He was in a meeting. I'm going to refrain at this time from saying where and exactly how many people were involved, but they were all officers. They were all senior military officers, in which one of them happens to be our source for this conversation. And in this meeting, Mark Milley, former chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, during that June 2020 and the Summer of Love riots, but specifically there at Lafayette Park in D.C., we learned that he mentioned to this group of officers that he, in fact, authorized the use of both heat and sound non-kinetic weapons. Well, that's directed energy weapons. That's what that means by non-kinetic. In other words, there's no entry wound, there's no exit wound, there's no hitting somebody over the head with a baton or hitting them with a less than lethal dose of a bear spray or some other sort of, a chemical deterrent or tear gas or rubber bullets. That's what a non-kinetic thing is a directed energy weapon. Now, we don't have verifiable proof from the video that we have poured through of that incident that the DOD elements of the crowd that were in the crowd that day and from down here at Fort Liberty, they changed the name. It'll always be Fort Bragg for those of us that live in North Carolina. But we don't have the evidence that they used whatever they brought, but we did find video proof that the United States Park Police did in fact use a small backpack version of an LRAD. That's a long-range audio device. It comes from the same technology that was developed by the military for these crowd control, riot control, frontline battle type devices. And so what we did is we started putting together the pieces of the puzzle. Now, Breanna, as you know, I've been probably working on this for, exactly 4 years this week, as a matter of fact. It was 4 years ago this week, in the days following January 6th of 2021, that I was working on doing frame-by-frame analysis of my own video from January 6th and starting to write my story, that I was actually staying with a special operations specialist. I'll just say tier 1 for now. Those who know what that means know what it means. And while at his house, he would be leaning over my shoulder, looking at my videos, and he would be pointing things out to me and saying, this is what's happening here. This is what this person's job is. This is what her job is. Watch how they handle themselves. Watch how they disappear into the crowd. They do their thing, and then they move along. And he started explaining to me that this is the kind of activities, the kind of actions that they take in overseas operations in hotspots around the world, color revolution operations. Our special forces are expert at starting riots. Well, look, a year ago this week, my mind went, and I started looking into all of these things. And one of the things that I stumbled upon was the fact that we have much more advanced directed energy weapons than just these small LRADs that we showed in the first article. We have much more advanced weapons than the riot control microwave, truck mounted weapons, which are all open source. As a matter of fact, you can go on YouTube and you can see DOD presentations of these weapons being used, even with journalists and Congress members volunteering themselves to be hit by one of these microwave weapons and take the blast. They can see and feel how it's all open source. This is not science fiction. It's not UFO. It's not Alex Jones tinfoil hat crap. This is real stuff. And this is what we're endeavoring to do, Joe Hanneman and myself, is to dig and base everything on the science that we know. Not only the open source science, but also what we're hearing from our DOD and intelligence community sources right now.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting. I want to talk more about what specifically this does when they use these types of weapons. I'm assuming it agitates the crowd, but do you think it maybe provoked them to become more violent and more aggressive towards law enforcement?
Well, in fact, there are types of these weapons that do exactly that thing. Now, from the Department of Interior IG report that we reference in this particular article, we talk about how they even talked about how some of the rioters ran away confused at the use of these LRAD devices. And then we also kind of hint towards the use of these are the other class of these weapons that everybody knows is that creates the Havana syndrome. This is something that Catherine Herridge reported on a week and a half ago. She got a CIA whistleblower to come out and talk about this. Again, this is not fantasy. This is not science fiction. This is not UFO stuff. This is all scientific. It's in the open source literature. It's available to anybody that wants to know about it. And that's kind of a second class, but there's a third class of these weapons. And these are the ones that are focused and can target individuals. And they do it typically not only with what they call infrasound or ultrasound, but more frequently with RF waves, microwave, radio frequency waves that resonate with different parts of the body. Now, okay, I'm gonna try and I'm gonna try and give you the version of this for the average listener. All right, and this is best for me to be able to absorb it as well. And as it has been explained to me by our own sources who actually participated in the development and the testing of these particular devices. This is how it was explained to me. If you look at the antenna on an old car, pickup truck or whatever, 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, an antenna on the car produces a resonance when it's hit with a particular range of radio frequencies. That's why we can pick up an AM signal, an FM signal on our car radio, is that antenna is designed to resonate only at that frequency. But that frequency doesn't affect us. Even though it's in the air and it's all around us, it does not resonate with our body parts. But the science, and we go all the way back to the 1950s in the Soviet Union when they were researching, studying, and developing what they called psychotronic weapons. They were developing these weapons and learning what parts of the body resonate at different frequency ranges. And that's where this science has gone over the last 70 years, is that they have discovered that the lungs will resonate at a certain frequency. The heart will resonate. The different folds of the brain, the different lobes of the brain will resonate at different frequencies as if it's just finely attenuated. They can resonate in this part of the brain just with a slight change. They can resonate in this. And by so doing, they can control and influence behaviors. Like, as we talked about, we had a very highly placed former, again, I have to be careful and remember how we worded it in the article, but it's a former commander of, very high-ranking commander over Special Operations Command in the Army. And his exact words to me were, as we showed in the article, that these particular types of advanced weapons, with them, they can stop your heart, they can make you shit your pants, or they can affect other parts and other organs in your body. And so with that, we understand now that they can not only make you go crazy, and they can do that with both audio and RF frequency agitation weapons. We also know that they can make you hear voices in your head. They can influence violence. They can influence behaviors that you never would have otherwise engaged in whatsoever. But as we've seen from the Havana class of these, Havana syndrome class of these things, they can make you have long-term, very, very horrific long-term health effects as well.
Steve, I'm going to ask you, because you were there on January 6th, and this sounds like a lot of the stories that we heard from people. I mean, I know I heard individuals saying that they never really thought they were going to go into the Capitol, even though they weren't violent that day, that they felt like they weren't acting like themselves. Do you think weapons like this possibly were used on J6 as well? Because it sounds like this was used possibly to make things more chaotic under President Trump.
This has always been something that I have been curious about. Now, I have no evidence whatsoever that these more advanced, quote unquote, RF agitation weapons were used on January 6th. We do not have the evidence of that. We do, in fact, have the evidence that the lower end LRAD, LRAD, consistent with the same model and type that was used at Lafayette Park, was in fact used on the West Terrace that day. I can also tell you from my own video evidence, I told you I've been on this for 4 years, from my own camera, that weapon was not used effectively. It is supposed to be a crowd control device. It's supposed to clear an area. I can tell you that we have the operators on camera confused about how to use it, didn't know how to, and ineffectively deployed it. I have it on my own camera. That's coming in part 2 of our series. But it's very curious because of all the trials I've covered, and we have dozens and dozens of testimonies, particularly during sentencing hearings, of these individuals talking to the judge, crying, tears running down their face, saying, "Your Honor, I don't know what happened to me that day. I've never had a day of violence in my life. I've never participated in a domestic violence. I've never had a criminal charge against me other than a speeding ticket in my entire life. And for some reason, I lost it that day. I don't know what came over me." Now, Breanna, a really good agent provocateur, skilled in the arts of starting riots, fanning the flames of riots, creating color revolutions, can do that. That same special operations commander who said to me that we can stop your heart, we can make you shit your pants, he also went on to say, and this will be in our second story, or second part 2 of the story. He also went on to say, would not need that for January 6th. He said, I would only need 4 or 5 of my best guys to make January 6th happen.
Steve, that has me on edge because Ashley Babbitt, who we know lost her life on January 6th when she was shot and killed by a Capitol police officer. We know that her family, I know a lot of people ask, why was she there that day? Why did she make her way into the Capitol that day? Why was she at that point going to be getting closer to lawmakers? Why? And a lot of people did, I think it was her husband I heard this from, but don't quote me on this, said that she had anxiety. She's a veteran, so she had anxiety from being in a claustrophobic area, and she might have been trying to escape. Does that sound like this might have? Yeah.
Yeah. Our sources who are, as I mentioned earlier, who participated in science, research, development, R&D, participated in the field deployment engineering of these smaller backpack size concealable agitation weapons, who continue to work and do testing on them as well. What they have told us is that someone with PSD, this will drive them batshit crazy. And so we look at all of those that were former military who never had a history of violence that were jacked up in January 6th. We're talking about lieutenant colonels. We're talking about Air Force pilots. We're talking about Green Beret. We're talking about all manner of people who had never participated in this type of thing ever in their life. We're talking about law enforcement officers of all types, FBI to local sheriffs, all the way to firemen, people who have been in a career for 20 years plus that could, in fact, create levels of psychological PTSD. And as a result of being exposed to this type of weapon, they can, in fact, lose it. I don't have proof that that happened on January 6th. We just know that the weapon exists. We know what we saw happen that day. We know that we have the experience from courtroom testimonies, trial transcripts, sentencing hearings of people that talk about having no understanding about why they acted that way that day as compared to the rest of their life, whether the rest of their life was 30 years or 60 or 70 years. We also have the most unusual of circumstances, and I can't reconcile this mathematically, but we have 4 people that dropped dead that day. We have Phillips, we have Boylan, all of whom's heart stopped. But then we also, at 10 p.m. that night, we had Brian Sicknick, who collapsed. Now, he died the next day, but he collapsed that night. And by the way, these types of agitation weapons have the potential to affect people on both sides of the police line.
Steve, it's horrifying, yeah, because it would make sense that it would affect both sides. If they don't have a way of actually just making sure it doesn't affect their own, so they're could potentially subject their own people to it as well. But again, I mean, I've spoken to a bunch of J6ers. A lot of them don't have any recollection as to how they ended up right at the front of the Capitol steps. And so I think that's telling in itself as well. So Steve, I'm glad you're on this. There's a lot to look into. I mean, I hope we could get to the bottom of this, especially since there's going to be a change in administration soon. But I'm sure they'd like to hide this, because this would destroy our federal government if this were to be proven potentially to have happened. So I look forward to seeing your part 2 in all of this, Steve.
And I want to say, before we sign off here, I'm not going to make claims on your show or anybody else's show or on Blaze or in one of our articles about things that we don't know for sure. Yeah. And do not know that this was deployed, but we have a lot of circumstantial evidence that is making us look for it in the crowd.
Yeah. Well, if you're hearing that this happened in June of 2020, what's stopping them from using it on January 6th of 2021? I don't know. But again, we don't have the evidence to directly claim that they did 100% use it. This is just pure speculation at this point. But Steve, I'm excited for your part 2, and I'm excited to learn more about this, because I think this is really telling. I think our federal government needs to wake up. And you know what? We're going to get great people in the Pentagon soon. Pete Hegseth is likely to be confirmed, and I'm sure this is something that he's going to want to look into as well, because this is something that he'd be really upset if he found out was used on the American people. So we shall see. Steve Baker, as always, incredible work. You never disappoint me. For our audience at home right now looking to read in on all of this, you got to head over to theblaze.com and give it a look. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. If you didn't know, let me explain to you who I am, because we are now available on several different platforms, including The Mel K Show, as well as Graham Allen's new platform, Dear America Plus. My name is Breanna. I left the corporate media world, and I was there for over 10 years. And after leaving Fox Corp because they wanted me to comply with an illegal private sector COVID vaccine mandate, I went on this venture into independent journalism. And because of all of that, we now have this great show. I cover all the topics the corporate media refuses to cover. But with that comes a little bit of a risk. We don't get funding from any type of corrupt corporations or foreign governments. We're strictly funded by you all at home. So if you like to support independent journalism and all the great work that we try to do here at the Breanna Morello Show, head on over right now to supportbre.com. That's supportbre.com. We've set up a platform for you to become a direct donor to this show. You can make a monthly donation or make a one-time donation. The monthly donations are greatly appreciated, though, because it lets us figure out budgeting. And that is very important when you're trying to get researcher and other hands on deck to create a program like this. So do me a favor, please head on over right now to supportbre.com. Make that either one-time donation or monthly donation. You get to pick the dollar amount, and it's safe and secure through Donor Box. So again, folks, it is supportbre.com. That's supportbre.com. That's how you keep independent journalism alive. The images coming out of California are absolutely devastating to see. It's been absolutely destroyed by several fires, and it's hard to believe that these all just randomly started naturally, we'll say. A lot of us think this is possibly arson, but of course, we're not going to hear from any elected officials right now. They're just doing their photo ops at the moment. Joining me now to discuss is the great host of the Joe Pags Show, Joe Pags, joining me today. Thank you, sir, for jumping on. I know you're a very busy man. Thank you.
I'll always make time for you. What's happening?
That's why you're the best. We're talking California wildfires, or I should just say fires at this point, because we don't know if these are just naturally coming about or if they are arson. I mean, California does have a history of arson, and these fires do quickly spread due to the fact that government officials, their elected officials, fail to uphold, or just to maintain, I should say, the forests. And so here we are watching these fires spread rapidly. Yesterday, everyone on X was talking about how this little fire that started in Hollywood was quickly spreading. And Joe, I get it. There's a lot of wind going on right now, but it's hard to believe that this is naturally taking place, that this is just an act of Mother Nature. What are you making of all of this?
You know, we don't know if it's nefarious or not. If it is, I hope that somebody pays the full penalty of the law and is behind bars for a long time. I would hate to think that somebody's so disgusting that they would start the fires. But let's go by what we actually know. And you and I, do our living as speaking the truth and speaking fact and being journalists. We know that they have wildfires in that part of California all the time. We know that. We know that 6 years ago, then President Trump said from the White House, you've got to do something to clean up the brush. You've got to do something to hydrate that area. We have to do something to stop this from happening. It's not okay. And 6 years ago, he was talking about billions of dollars in damage then, and nothing was done. He called out Gavin Newsom then. Just a few months ago on Joe Rogan's podcast, Trump sat there and said they've got plenty of water. They can have all the water they need, but they're diverting it to the Pacific Ocean to save some fish or a salamander or something stupid. And here you've got brittle brush, trees that should not be there, brush and leaves that have been there for years that are going to ignite and take out entire neighborhoods. It happened again. It was like he was prescient. Something has to happen. And God knows you need somebody who's in charge better than Gavin Newsom. And I would say that Karen Bass is in charge of LA, but she's not. She was busy in Ghana, yes, in Africa, studying or attending some inauguration of somebody you and I didn't know was elected. So I'm not sure what's going on, whether this was set on purpose. If it was, it's disgusting. They should pay the full penalty of law and spend the rest of their lives behind bars. But we know that this happens there. And at some point, the people of California and Los Angeles in that area have to be smarter about who they choose to lead that area, because this is nobody's fault but their leaders. This could have been averted. It could have been a small fire, and it could have been taken care of very quickly, but it's not going to happen if they don't make some change.
Yeah, and Joe, this is the problem with all of this, because Democrats in general seem to fail their way up. So although I know a lot of people on social media are calling for Gavin Newsom to resign, the odds of him resigning are pretty slim these days, because he knows if he just rides this storm out, that Democrats will have his back and likely promote him internally within the party. And so why back down now? And the point I think that's so disturbing in all of this, firemen are trying their hardest to fight back on these fires. But unfortunately, as they go to the fire hydrants, there's no water coming out.
Right.
And it's insane to think that this is happening. But live on television, there was a news anchor who was reporting about this. And then they were saying, oh, no, well, we're not hearing that there's no water coming out of the fire hydrants. And then one of the reporters in the field quickly fact checked that. Let's take a listen. And then I want to get your reaction on the other side.
No firefighters have told us that they are running out of water.
And let's go out to Gigi Graciette. She is live in Pacific Palisades. I know your signal's not the best, but Gigi, what can you tell us?
Well, firefighters have told me they have no water on this block.
I mean, it's that simple, and it's that crazy that the water reserves weren't built up in time for all of this. They usually have this planned out. They're supposed to have this all planned out. And like you just mentioned, for some reason, the local government hasn't been doing its job. Joe, what do you make of this? We're all laughing at the news fact-checking in live time type of situation, but he might have not known, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But what do you make of these fire hydrants just completely running out of water?
Well, I'm not as nice as you. I was a news director. I was a TV news anchor. You and I have been in news for a long time. That guy was covering for what was going on in that area. Now, you're probably right. He didn't hear directly from somebody who said we ran out of water. He's got a reporter there on the scene that I'm sure was filling in the producers, filling in the people who were the managing editors and everybody else, that there's no water here. And we've been reporting nationally that they were out of water in many fire hydrants. So I believe that person is complicit, just like the complicit legacy media, in spreading mis or disinformation to cover for their buddies. He probably likes Karen Bass. I don't know that to be a fact, but could be. He probably likes Gavin Newsom. I'm glad that the Gigi, whoever she is out in the field, said they are out of water. They have no water here. And I want to allude back to what I said earlier. Trump made it clear just a few months ago on Rogan. There is plenty of water that comes downstream from the melting snow in Canada that goes all the way through the west coast of the United States. There is plenty of water, but because of some fish or some tribal something, they're diverting the water to the Pacific. And then they're doing it, then they're pretending like they've got drought situation there. It's not a drought. They've got plenty of water that they're not utilizing because they want to say, hey, look how great we are for the environment. We're saving some, fin breathing, some sort of gill, little tiny, I don't know what the fish is. Breanna, I don't know what the fish is. They're saving some stupid fish that some tribe there said you've got to save. And in turn, you've lost 360,000 people without power. You've got at least 5 people dead. And you've got thousands and thousands of homes that are just gone. Entire neighborhoods overnight are gone, and they feel good about their move with the salamander or whatever the hell it is. Look, at the end of the day, these are not leaders. These are people, as you said very correctly, they have somehow failed their way up. Karen Bass was a racist when she was a representative in Congress. She's a horrible person now. Gavin Newsom was out campaigning in Alabama in front of some church that he thought that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke at or something, campaigning for presidency for some future race, I guess. It wasn't going to be this year, instead of focusing on the needs of California. That's why people are they're flocking for the border to leave California. They can't trust their leadership because there is no leadership. It makes me sick. But I do want to go back to where you started. that anchor, whether he knew or didn't know if there was water, should have said, there are reports there is no water, although we have not heard that directly from the fire department. He didn't say that. He seemed to try to dismiss it by alleging that we haven't heard that from anybody, as if it's not happening. And his own reporter had to check him live on the air, and I'm glad she did.
Yeah, and it's so obvious at this point. I mean, there's all these videos coming about of the fire department having to get water from their own truck, putting it in women's bags and tossing it over the fire, hoping that would help. It's sick to even see that happening and taking place. But again, I mean, Joe, the failures are endless, and this is also important to address. You know, the LA City Council appointed their first female lesbian fire chief. And then also there's the assistant chief who's also a female lesbian, as well as the training commander. Now, Joe, I know more about their sex life than we actually should really know. And I'm going to be direct. I get so angry that we have to sit here and talk about what their sexual preferences are rather than their actual job requirements. And these three have been doing interviews in local news for over 2 years now, talking about their preference. And it's disturbing that this is the qualification that lands them these jobs. Do you think that plays a role in what we're seeing unravel here today, that LA is just not prepared to fight back these fires?
Yes, because you and I can talk about who we know they like to sleep with, but I can't tell you what their qualifications for the job are. Can you?
Nope. I have no idea.
We have no, Breanna, we have no clue. This is, look, we've hit critical mass nationally. That's why we had this mandate in the election. The Senate, the House, the presidency, the Supreme Court are all leaning right. They're all conservative because Americans are sick and tired of this. DEI is on the way out. Nobody told these people in LA clearly. It's on the way out. This whole idea that the biggest terrorist threat in the country is white supremacy, that's on the way out. It's not true, as you've got people that are radicalized in the military running people over New Orleans. The fact that you've got 3 people in charge of the Los Angeles Fire Department that you and I can't tell, and we do this for a living. We do information for a living. We can't tell anybody watching or listening what their qualifications are. That's nuts. That's absolutely insane. Yet you and I both know who they like to sleep with. Help me out with that, because I can't figure it out.
I can't figure it out either. And I wish they'd stop surrounding that information. To be honest too, Joe, if they were heterosexual men and they were so open about their sexual preferences and how they want to hire more men who have that same sexual preference, there would be a lawsuit filed against LA County for just that, or for the city, I should say. So to hear this continuing on and continuing to push this narrative is really upsetting to me, but it's not surprising. This is what they do. This is why we have the great work of people like Robbie Starbuck, who's out there every day forcing these corporations to end these DEI hiring practices, because it needs to end. It's got our country in probably the lowest place we've ever been, and it's time that we all call it out. And I'm so thrilled that we're doing just that. Joe, before you go, I wanted to get your take on this, because we saw, and this was at Jimmy Carter's funeral on Thursday, we saw Barack Obama and President Trump having a good old laugh. Obama's laughing. We don't really know 100% what Donald Trump was saying to him, but according to New York Post, it had something to do with, we need to talk later because it's important. What do you make of this? Because Barack Obama, he doesn't seem to, and by the way, Michelle's not by his side, according to reports. She didn't want to be sitting next to President Trump.
Well, listen, Trump is Hitler. He's a fascist. He's horrible, orange man bad. He's trying to take over, never leave office. He wants to be a monarch. And Barack Obama just was thrilled to sit there and joke it up at Jimmy Carter's funeral. I don't understand. These people, listen, here's what I got out of that. I don't know if the lip readers are right. We've got to talk something important. Maybe they're talking about their golf game. I have no idea. But here's what I do know, that the legacy media has been so exposed by their disgusting coverage of President Trump over the past 4 years, so exposed that the people that were allegedly on their side, one by one, Jill Biden, Barack Obama, as they get anywhere near this guy, they are thrilled by it, and they're acting like school children. I hope that the one takeaway we get, and I don't know what they were saying to each other, hopefully we'll find out, but I hope the one takeaway we get from that and other instances when you had Trump meeting with world leaders at Mar-a-Lago, all of them, kneeling at his toes. Mm-hmm. I hope that the people watching and listening to you will realize that you're real news, that the legacy media is on the way out. The legacy media doesn't even realize how over and how dumb they are. Put a fork in me. I don't know. I want to go back to the fire for a second. Did you see David Muir from ABC? Did you see the outfit he was wearing? For those who didn't see it, now, you probably don't have the picture. Maybe you could put it in post. But David Muir is out there reporting, the guy from the ABC Nightly News. And he's wearing this turnout coat like he's a fireman. But it's very tight and very form-fitting. And as he's turning around to show the fire behind, you can see that they were making the jacket tighter with these clothesline clips. I mean, what are we talking about here? Breanna, the guy thought he was a model, that he was on the runway, and he had to look really, really svelte and good and buff as he's reporting about devastation in L.A. They are so done, they don't even know they're done. And that thrills me, because when you and I do news, we do it for real and people can rely on us. You can't rely on them anymore. Again, I don't know what Barack Obama and Donald Trump are talking about, but it exposes the complicit media for who they are for the past 4 years.
Yeah, and it's only going to get worse, and I don't think they've realized it yet. I constantly am jumping in on Joy Reid's show on MSNBC, so my audience doesn't have to do so to get some sound bites going. But the language they use, they are so full of hate and rage, and it's almost as if they're trying to create an enraged base. There's that photo that you were just referring to, the clips in the back.
I mean, what is that?
I laugh all the time because earlier today, I actually did an interview with Father Calvin Robinson today, and I only had time to do half my hair, not the whole head of hair. So I had half of my curls done, and then the rest of it was clipped back. And I joke and said that, I was doing that too. But I'm not behind wildfire showing you people losing their homes and trying to look cute.
Right. I've covered fires. They're devastating. They're horrible. I never once thought to myself, do I look great? Am I making it happen? It's like thank God he turned sideways, because we never would have known. It's like, where did you find a form-fitting turnout coat? Because you and I have covered fires. We've covered firefighters. They're big, loose, protective gear. It's not to make you look good. Breanna, I'm telling you, they're done and they don't know it. And I'm glad, because people like you can flourish. I'm glad that they don't. I hope they never realize it.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't sound like they're learning. They're not learning their lesson. I mean, remember when Anderson Cooper was there doing that? I'm not sure what hurricane it was, but when he was intentionally gone to like the deepest part of the flooding, and his cameraman is just standing there, relaxed, chilled, nothing wrong with him. They love the drama. And I get it. As a producer, you do want the quick, punchy sound bites, but we're talking about natural disasters or just disasters in general.
Yes.
And so we're talking about loss of life, people losing their homes. So have some compassion and stop caring for yourself. But that's what they do. And
what was the conversation though? Did David Muir say, "Hey, this is too big. Can somebody make me look better?" I mean, what's the conversation before you go live nationally on, I guess, the top-rated newscast at 6:30? I mean, what was I can't wear this. I look fat. I mean, what was it? Because again, you and I have done this job. We don't care. If I've got soot and smoke and my hair is falling out, doesn't matter as long as I'm covering the story. It's not about me.
Yeah. Well, that's how they all are. And I joke all the time too. My producer, Pete, I'm like, Pete, make me look skinny. Make me look skinny. So obviously that was probably what happened with his producers. They're like, don't worry, we brought the clips for you, David.
That's crazy.
Joe Pags. It's insane. It really is. Joe, I want to thank you for jumping on with me today. Again, to our audience, you do host a great show, The Joe Pags Show, which is available on Rumble and X, as well as a radio show too. So make sure you head on over there. Your X page is in the description of this video, and so is your Rumble. So give it a follow. Joe Pags, as always, thank you, sir.
Keep up the great work.
I'm not an expert on much, especially when not driving. Don't ever ask me for driving advice, or I'll voluntarily tell you. My rims look like they've been chewed up and spit out. But if you're asking me about a good steak, I'm an expert on that. And what a segue this is. Head on over right now to ozarkwagyu.com. They are incredible American Wagyu products delivered to your front door. It's actually a company owned by a family in Missouri, and it's a small local farm. So they're literally delivering local to your front door anywhere in the country. They ship. Their shipping is incredible. I love it. I order regularly from them. It's ozarkwagyu.com. I love their hot dogs. Those are amazing. It's all beef, no mystery meat. They don't use mRNA jabs either. Very key point I want to highlight as well. They have a great sirloin. So many great cuts of meat that you're going to want to try right now. When you head over to ozarkwagyu.com, you get a discount on top of some of those sale prices. Use that promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE to save. You're not going to regret it. I can promise you that much. I sent this over to my producer for Christmas, and he told me it was amazing. So again, folks, it's ozarkwagyu.com. And if you're looking to save extra cash, which we all are these days, make sure you use that promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE. That will lock in some additional savings. And again, there's no mRNA vaccines used on their cattle. Again, folks, ozarkwagyu.com, promo code BRE. All right, I know many of you at home are very passionate about federal spending. I know I am too. We're done with all the pork, and we want our government to crunch down because we're in debt. And it's a very serious issue. Elon Musk, who's supposed to be the head of Doge, telling the media that he actually might not reach that $2 trillion federal budget goal that he originally set. Now, he claims that was the high. He says that was the best they could probably do. He doesn't think they're going to come too close to it, but he's going to try his best, is what he's talking about now, which is deeply concerning because we want all of it cut. And so I got to say, we're going to aim for that $2 trillion because this country's in debt and we got a lot of paying off to do. Joining me to discuss, because there's a brand new poll out that reflects how Americans feel about all of this, is Rasmussen Report's Mark Mitchell joining us. Mark also does a great channel over at YouTube. You got to check it out, Rasmussen Reports. Give them a follow if you're on YouTube. Mark, and you're also on Rumble too, I should say. Mark, thanks for jumping on with me today because you guys did a great poll in regards to spending, and I want to get to that. You guys asked about federal spending and Mike Johnson and whether or not he's going to do a good job at all of this, and 61% of voters approve of cutting back the size of the federal government to reduce spending, if I have that correct. So tell us about this latest poll, because I think it's interesting. Most Americans do want these things to be rolled back.
Yeah, there's been this myth for a really long time in American politics. The Democrats are the big government party and the Republicans are small government. And to be honest with you, over the economy's gotten so bad that really like everybody is now. I mean, Democrats do disapprove of cutting the government, but it's only like 48% to 43%. Republicans are overwhelmingly in favor of it, 82%, and even independents, 60% of independents approve of it and only 26% disapprove. So everybody's really looking around and saying, not only is my personal finances unsustainable, but the direction of the government is. And that's the theme of this. And I think voters also kind of acknowledge that it's a tough road to hoe because only 12% of voters say it's very likely that Congress is actually going to cut back the size and scope of the government. So I guess we're really going to see as Trump comes in. And quite honestly, I never personally thought Doge was the big part of this. I think restructuring the economy in a way that brings back the middle class is the biggest upside of Trump. I think we do need to grow our way out of this problem because government debt, and I love this topic because I actually got my MBA and came out of private sector. The government's been growing debt for a really long time. The problem is that starting back in the late 2000s, medium income in the country just stopped. It stagnated. So the problem is that to get back to just where we were, 12, 15 years ago, the median income in this country would have to be like 3 times bigger than it was back then. And it just hasn't kept pace. And that's because we're in a populist uprising because there's been unparalleled wealth inequality over the last, 10, 20 years. Ain't Republican, ain't Democrat. It's the uniparty kleptocracy, and that's why people approve of cutting the government. Like, what else can they do? They're saying no mas. It's too much.
Yeah, and 44% consider it likely that the Congress will actually cut the size of the government. So that sounds like they're not very optimistic at any of these fronts. I think it's interesting, though, Mark, because, again, I mean, a lot of people were on board with Doge, and I don't know. Do you think that they sound confident that both, like you just said, because he's brought on some great people, like Peter Navarro is bringing back too, I must note. So he's bringing on good people who will help him build a stronger economy. But do you think with all of those elements that the American people are going to be very confident that he can get the job done?
Very hard to put your finger exactly on what question to ask to capture the sentiment on this. Yeah. And the one that pops into my mind is the question that we asked back in the fall, which is, do you trust the federal government? And roughly a quarter to 30% say yes. Everybody else says basically no. So that's who the real referendum was against, is the federal government. And this says, okay, well, people aren't too confident that Congress will actually be able to cut back the size and scope of the government. 12% very likely, 32% somewhat, but a plurality say not likely, 49%. But they want it done because they don't trust the government. They hate it. And so I think people look at Elon, and I think the whole Doge idea is very popular because of what he did with Twitter, which is cut 80% of it, fire all the wokesters, put them out on the street, get rid of the ideological aspects of it, and change the way it operates, which should be a for-profit enterprise with very transparent policies surrounding censorship. And we'll see if, that's the way the wind is blowing, because the famous weather vane Mark Zuckerberg is doing the right thing. But what he doesn't understand is it all comes down to execution. And I think voters, Americans, absolutely understand that, which is why Twitter is rapidly growing. And I don't think Facebook will.
Yeah. And the interesting part too is, like, Mark, I remember like 2 years ago, we were talking about Zuckerbucks. And so to hear that we've gone from the Zuckerbuck discussion to free speech and him being an advocate for free speech is mind blowing. We actually had Mike Benz on the other day, and I asked Mike, because obviously he's like this big, he knows all things related to free speech and censorship, whether or not he believes Zuckerberg. And he said, yeah, he's been actually trying to push for free speech and has been getting pressured by the government. And so Mike Benz actually thinks that this is authentic. I thought it was just maybe a political move. I know. I made the same face too, and he told me, but he's 100% behind it. And he's like, Breanna, I've been watching this guy for years now. I think he's on board with getting rid of censorship. So, we'll see. I don't really have my hopes up too high, but Mike Benz is all in on that.
Yeah, that's the worst Mike Benz take I ever heard, but maybe he's right. I don't know. Like, I love him. I think he's right. Apparently now only 99.9% of the time. Rasmussen Reports still has a shadow ban, and people say, no, like, nobody goes to Facebook anymore. And we've been putting out posts for 3 or 4 years now, solid, 1 to 2 a day, and we haven't picked up any followers. And it kind of coincides with around the time we started talking about election integrity and COVID vaccine safety. So I definitely think there's still stuff going on. But looking at what he said, he says, okay, we're going to use a community notes system instead of fact checkers. Well, fact checkers or community notes could both be effective or not effective if you have it set up where it can be gamed just like every other system has been, like the Reddit moderators, like the Wikipedia moderators. And also he says, we're going to move the team from California to Austin. Well, what if you move it from a deep red part of California to exactly Austin, like the heart of lefty Texas? Like, it is possible to screw that up. And I don't know. I guess we'll see. So many people use Facebook. It probably is much more influential than we give it credit for. So
I know. I'm not on it. I'm done. Yeah, well, you're not alone. You're not alone. And I'm at this point when I nuke my Instagram as well. Everything I post, Mark, gets flagged for election fraud and it's not. I'm not even talking about anything related to the election. So I'm just over it altogether. But I wanted to ask you another question, because I just had Joe Pags on the program, and with Joe, we were talking about the California fires that are going on right now. And it's interesting because you guys over at Rasmussen Reports did a poll back in 2020 about whether or not Americans believe this is all related to climate change. I think that's really important, because we're seeing those on the left try to pretend like it is climate change that's related to all these wildfires, but are Americans really buying it?
Well, this is one of the big ones I'm watching, because I think the Overton window is going to shift on this, and it hasn't yet. So these numbers are from 2020, but a heck of a lot has happened since then. A lot of trust has been lost in institutions. People didn't even really know what was going on with COVID when we asked these questions. But at the time, 41% said that the most likely reason for the wildfires in California is climate change. 54% said a variety of other natural and human factors. And for Democrats, it was 64% who said climate change. But what it's turning into, it's like morphing into this blanket excuse for Democrat failures. And because of the shift in the media landscape, just in the last 4 years, really just in the last 1 year, I think on a lot of things like this, on reparations, on abortion, on all these things that the Overton window moved massively left, I think we're going to see blowback. And I guess we'll have to maybe come back on, but the numbers should be out sometime next week about what they are now. I don't think Americans are going to buy climate change as much anymore. And quite frankly, their economic situation, I think this is a luxury belief. And now they're worried about burning their houses burning down, not being able to get insurance, and then the government pissing on them and telling them it's raining. Like, that's what this is. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
No. 1,000%. And that's the point of all of this. I mean, President Trump has been warning Newsom to handle the forest management in his state, and he's just decided not to do so. And that's why I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's incompetency. I don't think it's incompetency anymore. I think it's to push this climate change agenda that they have, because they need the numbers. Sadly, they need the devastation. They need those images so they could do just that. So at this point, And I don't think the fires are random. This is me putting on my tinfoil hat. I don't think they're random. I think it's very obvious yesterday when I sat here and saw the Fox Live shot of the chopper where that random fire started in Hollywood. It just seems at this point that these fires are starting, and I'm just have to assume at this point that it's arson because it's happened before in the past. It's not that crazy of an idea, Mark, but if you want to put on your tinfoil hat and react to that, you can.
No. My second favorite public opinion tool is Google Trends. And right now, believe it or not, in this country, searches for the term eco-terrorism just in the last day are outstripping searches for global warming. So searches for the term arson in California are massively increasing over searches for the term climate change. So I do think you're not alone. I think there's a healthy skepticism of where these fires are coming from. And again, hopefully the polling numbers bear it out. But I mean, like, I think that everybody knows, like California, arson searches through the roof. They're probably looking for video, and it's probably going to come out. And that's probably what we're going to see in 2 or 3 days on Twitter is all these videos of people lighting these fires. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, there was one that I saw, but I couldn't confirm it myself, so I wouldn't even air it. But yeah, no, I think that's the case. And I honestly have had enough of this, and I feel horrible for the people who lost their homes. But we got to wake up. We got to realize that this is not accidental, and that these things are both government failures and possibly crimes being committed. And so we have to keep our minds open to all of that. Mark Mitchell, I want to thank you as always for jumping on today. For all of you at home right now listening, you got to head over to his YouTube Rumble page. Give him a follow. It's Rasmussen Reports. We've got that link for you as well. Mark, as always, we'll see you here next time. And let me know when you get that poll in, because I would love to compare both 2020 and 2025. Because I think Americans have changed.
Right away. Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed that segment, make sure you're subscribing to this show because we're a podcast as well, available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and so many more. So give us a follow there and leave us some feedback. I love seeing your comments, and I love a good 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it when you do just that. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis can't stop stacking up those losses. She was just handed another loss earlier this week. And it's going to cost her Georgia taxpayers about $21,000, a little over $21,000, I should say. It's a good one because it comes from our friends over at Judicial Watch. They have been going after Fani Willis's office in regards to open records requests. And joining us now to detail just that is Chris Farrell. He is Judicial Watch Director of Investigations and Research. Chris, congratulations. This is a major victory for you all at Judicial Watch because, Fani Willis doesn't want to comply with open requests in regards to the records that you guys have been asking for. And again, she's just trying to, pretend like it didn't happen, ignore it, and just drag this on. So now she has to pay your legal fees, and she's also being forced by the court to comply with your request. Now, you guys are looking for any type of communications that were made between her team, Jack Smith's office, the Biden regime. Let's go to the beginning of all of this. How did this come about? And then let's talk our way through how you guys received your settlement, your grant from the court saying that, yes, now they have to pay your legal fees as well.
Sure, happy to do so. It's great to be with you. Well, first off, look, when we saw this really contrived legal campaign against President Trump, this effort to use every single kind of trick in the book to go after him, to jail him, to bankrupt him, every effort was made in a really corrupt way by his political opponents to try to destroy him, like nothing we've ever seen in American history before. It was very obvious to us that this really kind of third-rate county district attorney, Fani Willis, who really is a disgrace. If you look at her professional and her personal conduct, she's a train wreck, right? But we knew that, she was going to try to synchronize her efforts, coordinate with the Biden administration, whether that was Jack Smith, the outlaw prosecutor who's just been running around, inventing authority for himself and unlawfully pursuing the president, but also Merrick Garland at the Department of Justice, even the Biden White House, right? We know that there were efforts and communications between her office and the Biden White House. So we wanted to find out, hey, what have you been doing? What kind of contact? What kind of communications? What sort of meetings? Have you coordinated or synchronized legal briefings? What strategies do you have? All these questions that we had we filed open records requests under Georgia law, but also federally using the Federal Freedom of Information Act law to find out what was going on. Now, here's the incredibly arrogant part of Fani Willis's conduct in this regard. When we filed in Georgia to find out under Georgia law what her communications were, because she's a public official now, right? She's a Fulton County DA. She has to abide by Georgia's open records law. When we filed in court and sued her because she failed to respond under the law to our request, she defaulted. She didn't even bother to show up in court. I've been at Judicial Watch for 25 years. We've been in business for 30 years. Never before has a government official simply blown off the court and basically said, drop dead, I'm not even going to show up. I'm not going to participate. That's what Fani Willis did. So she's a one-of-a-kind special character. She blew off the lawsuit, blew off an appearance in court. And obviously the court didn't find that very funny, right? If you're a judge trying to run a court and the DA just doesn't even bother to show up. So we entered a default judgment in our favor. And that was important because what that does is two things. Number one, it allows us to recover our costs, our time, our money, our effort to pursue these records. And she's going to have to end up producing all these records and documents that we've sought. So that's how we get to the $21,000. That's really legal fees and costs for us in pursuing this. And she's got now about probably 10 days to pay it.
Yeah. And that bill is going to be forwarded to Georgia taxpayers, though. She doesn't personally have to pay that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's the downside. The downside is Georgia taxpayers pay the bill. But I would also counsel Georgia taxpayers who are also Georgia voters to smarten up when it comes to the next election.
And that's key. That really is key, because it's really hard to understand why people like Fani Willis land in their position. Like you said, she's not well spoken, honestly. When she goes up there and she talks in front of the media, she doesn't have a composure that you'd want for somebody who is district attorney. And so I just don't understand, even watching her, when we watched her sit there between her and her boyfriend, Nathan Wade, go back and forth, she didn't seem professional. She looked sloppy, and she didn't. Yeah.
She doesn't have the intellect, the judgment, the demeanor, the character required to be the district attorney of Fulton County. I mean, she simply comes up short in each category. Now, she may have some shtick that she goes through, or she may have some appeal. I'm not sure what it is, but it certainly isn't a professional, judicious, serious, thoughtful manner. And for whatever reason, she's gotten away with it for as long as she has.
Yeah, and I think that's why she was so cocky enough not to show up when she was supposed to. I know that they were supposed to turn over records to you, the communications. I know that they haven't complied with that either. They've only turned over two items to you guys, two documents to you all. Detail what you've seen thus far, and if you've seen a connection in communications between Fani Willis's office and the White House.
Yeah, well, we know that there's contact and communication because from other reporting, from other sources, from other documents, it's been detailed that their office, even in the form of her boyfriend, the other prosecutor on the case, Nathan Wade, he made trips to the White House, according to some records. And so there's been this level of coordination and synchronization. This is political targeting. This is the use of law enforcement to attack a political opponent. It's all baseless nonsense. This has been laid out so plainly. All these various prosecutions have fallen apart, with the exception of the lunatic judge in New York, who persists in pursuing Trump in that regard. But, the American people saw through all of this. So all these efforts to criminalize President Trump, all these efforts to attack the people around him who worked for him and supported him, all these, charges out of nowhere, manufacturing cases, the American people saw through it. They had X-ray vision to see the truth. And that's why, despite every effort under the sun, people saw it as a political, not prosecution, but a persecution. And they still returned him to office. And that's the lesson. You can try all these stunts. You can try to rig the system. You can try to go after somebody in an unlawful way. But the American people aren't stupid. And they see this for what it is. And in the end, they're given a choice. And they picked President Trump despite every effort to turn this guy into some kind of a monster. It just didn't work.
And, they wanted a mugshot. They wanted that mugshot so bad.
Exactly.
And it worked out. And it worked out for Trump, honestly. I think it made him very relatable to most Americans. And they know what it's like to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they just made him very relatable. And you also mentioned Nathan Wade and his meetings at the White House. I mean, he literally billed taxpayers for those meetings. And so that's how we know that he had those meetings within the White House. And so it's so absurd that they were so cocky about all of this. And I never thought that it was going to come out and play out. Jeff Clark, a friend of mine, is one of the co-defendants in all of this. And he's had his life completely destroyed by Fani Willis and also the DC bar. But again, this shouldn't be happening in the first place. And it's just so enraging that they've gotten away with this. And I really hope that's not the case. So I want to ask you, now that you've gotten the court to say, yes, they're going to pay your legal fees and they have to turn over these documents. We know that she's not complying thus far. What if Fani Willis decides that she's still not going to comply? What's your next move, I guess I should say?
Yeah, I mean, we will never let this go, right? We're the people that uncovered Hillary Clinton's email server, right? And that all started with a FOIA request about Benghazi, right? It was a long story arc from the attack in Benghazi to Hillary Clinton's email server being disclosed as an outside means by which she was operating. That same kind of long story arc fits here. We will never let go of this case. We're going to drive it into the ground, and we're going to get every detail we possibly can under the law by pursuing it aggressively. And, whether it's 3 months from now or 10 years from now, rest assured, we will continue to press forward and get every document that we're due.
I love to hear that. I love to hear that. Chris, thank you for all the great work you guys do over at Judicial Watch. You guys do an incredible job. And to remind our audience, head over to the website, take a look around, because there's so much that you guys are working on, so many FOIA requests, lawsuits that you guys are dropping, that you got to stay in the know. I know I sign up for your notifications, so I'm very well aware of all the great work you guys are doing. So thank you for that.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Support companies that support our beliefs. That's what we should all be doing. And I've got a great company that you probably know about, but you didn't know there was a great sale going on right now over at mypillow.com. Mike Lindell has literally put everything on the line for this country. And so if you're looking for some incredible items, head on over to mypillow.com, take a look around, support Mike Lindell, who's also supporting the show as well, I should say. Now, when you use promo code BREE, you're going to save up to 66% off, plus all of these sale prices that you see right now on your screen. I mean, my coffee, $18.74. You're only getting that deal when you use promo code BREE. That's promo code BRE. And you guys know I'm very excited. I'm going to order another set. The Giza bed sheets are also on sale right now. It's an incredible offer. These bed sheets are better than any hotel bed sheets I've ever slept on. So head over to mypillow.com right now. Take a look around. So many amazing items that you probably didn't even realize were on sale are on sale right now when you use that promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE at checkout. I got an interesting tip from one of you actually sending me this article. I got to say, it's a good one too, because this should be on your radar. In Illinois, there is a proposed bill that would help illegals avoid getting arrested by ICE. Ultimately, what it does is it allows those who change their name to kind of just start with a fresh new start. And that's going to be a problem, folks, especially if you're illegally living in the United States and you're trying to flee a federal agency or even local PD. So this is something that Republicans in the state are trying to sound the alarm on, and rightfully so. Joining me now to discuss is Victor Avila. He is with us now. He is a retired HSI ICE agent, and he joins us now. Victor, sorry, so many letters in that one, but I'm glad you're with us, of course, because there's a lot to dive into on this. I know people in the area are concerned, and Republicans especially, that just the simple change of the name could allow illegal aliens to flee and to just avoid potentially being deported. And this would affect violent criminals. So what do you make of this? Because Republicans are deeply concerned.
Yeah, a couple of things is very concerning. One, obviously, the identity of the person, which is one of the biggest concerns that we have with the millions of illegals that have come into the country, is to know exactly who they are to begin with. But here's the concern where it begins. It actually begins at the border because we might not actually know the exact identity of the person. Remember, Biden and Harris allowed, and along with Mayorkas, allowed these people to come in and say whatever name they wanted to say, put their fingerprints down, and take a picture and all that. But we took their information at face value. There was no vetting of that information. So if the illegal alien said his name is Jose Lopez, that's what we went with. Now, imagine that's one identity plus a second from his true identity. Then if this law actually goes through, it might be potentially be a third identity that would really, what it does, it would provide cover for illegal alien to less be detected by police. Now, I understand, I was reading the proposed law about how it kind of falls on the shoulders of the police there in Chicago. And can you imagine how overwhelmed they would be with the number of illegals in just in the Chicago area that we know are there, that have gone there? We've seen the problems that they had at the airports and around the city. And so they're kind of saying, well, no, the police are going to check these names, but it's going to be the same problem, Breanna. Is like it's not like one or two that they could check. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of them, potentially maybe in the millions. And that's where they create the backlog where all this time it's advantageous to illegal to hide from authorities.
Yeah, and Democrats are like experts at causing chaos, and I think that's what they're trying to do here to help these individuals fly under the radar, and that's exactly what it sounds like this bill is going to try to do. So we'll follow it and see how it ends up. But I mean, again, I was following actually a tip that was provided by me from a member of the audience, and it was about a separate case regarding a potential murder, and this individual was not a U.S. citizen and had multiple names, and police were unable to catch up with them. So every time they pulled this individual over, whether it was a traffic stop or something similar to that, they didn't realize that this person was wanted by ICE. And it's just something that's a real issue in this country. And I really hope we get to the bottom of it, because these individuals, we take their biometrics. I mean, this shouldn't be that difficult for us to be able to do if you're not a U.S. citizen, to take your biometrics whenever you have an interaction with law enforcement. I think that would be really important and would actually improve our safety in this country. But speaking of just that, Victor, you actually flagged something for me. It's in regards to Mexico finally being open to the idea of taking on Mexican migrants if they're deported by the United States. Now, this is different because the Mexican president, she's sounded really tough, and she's been actually quite nasty to President Trump, but she seems to have a bit of a softer approach right now. What would this do right now for our mass deportation plan if Mexico actually did this and accepted those non-Mexican migrants who were deported by the United States into their country?
I think Mexico is realizing, especially the president of Mexico right now, that she's not going to have a lot of options here and a lot of choices when it comes to dealing with the United States. I think initially they're trying to treat the Trump administration like the Biden administration to see how much they could get away with. And they're finding out very quickly that they're not. They're not going to get away with anything anymore. We're sick and tired of Mexico not participating in deporting these people from their country. Remember, they came in through Mexico, millions of them from all over the world in Mexico, and they were okay with that. Initially, they said, well, you're not going to allow them to deport them back into Mexico. Well, why can you allow them to come in but not to be removed through your country? And obviously, she walked that back. And there's a lot of things, I think, happening in the background here. I think there might have been a phone call involved somewhere here saying, no, you will accept them back. And as a matter of fact, I hear from my sources that Mexico is making many arrangements as far as facilities to accept these people from wherever country they are. The U.S. is going to do, and ICE is going to do several things here. One, we might not necessarily want to take them to Mexico. Some, it'll be easy, especially maybe Central American countries. But if we're talking about someone from China and Africa, we might want to take them further away from the border, because the closer they are, and I can tell you this based on experience, the closer they are to the border, the easier it is for them to make the attempt to come back into the country. Even though our border will be more secure, Border Patrol will be back on the line, they'll still we don't want them to have that easy opportunity to come right back. And that's one of the issues that we've been dealing a lot for the several years is these prior deports coming back into the country. And so I see Mexico backpedaling. A lot of things I think you're going to see with Mexico a lot, Breanna, is you're going to see the Mexican presidents be saying a lot of different things publicly. And in the background, there's believe it or not, was gonna be some participation, which I'm okay with. We want Mexico to play ball here with the U.S. When it comes to the cartels, the fentanyl, and all the other illicit things that happen from their country into ours. We want them to play. We want them to cooperate. And they might not want to say it publicly because they're very proud and they're a sovereign country, and they're going to throw all these excuses and kind of cover for them. But I think below all that, there is going to be some covert, if you will, cooperation, and I'm okay with that. I don't care what they call it, what they name it, as long as the problems start taken care of, starting in their country. I think you're going to see some major changes.
Yeah, I think so. And just to remind our audience too, you don't get elected in Mexico as a politician if you don't get the blessing from the cartels. So I think a lot of the on-camera stuff that you're talking about is just all going to be, like I said, in front of the camera. But she's going to have to comply because President Trump is a lot scarier, and we need to shut down what's going on right now because the cartels. I mean, we just saw it was Kyle Seraphin. He just was like, before we did an interview with him, he's like, "Hey, Brad, did you see this?" And it was like a rocket launcher that he says could take down like helicopters and all these other things. And he's like, that was going. Border Patrol caught it going to Mexico, and so we have to get serious about this because not only does it put Americans at risk, but also Mexicans. I mean, I don't understand why anyone wouldn't want border security because these gangs shouldn't be able to just transport weapons like that so freely. And the scarier part is that was either made here in the United States or it somehow got here and is being sent to Mexico. So I don't know what side it is on that one, but it's horrifying to think about. But Victor, I wanted to get your take on another one because this is another horrific situation. Earlier this week, two migrants, Venezuelan migrants, did kill, and I keep saying migrants, I should say illegal aliens. I'm correcting myself on this one. Did kill an immigration agent in Mexico. So I want to talk about this because and you messaged me about this. I believe there's some ties to the Trene de Agua, I always pronounce it, everyone laughs at me in the chat, gang. And that's the Venezuelan prison gang that's made its way into the United States. So tell us a little bit about this story because I think there's also an interesting connection between the gang and Iran as well.
You're going to hear a lot more about this. I'm one of the ones putting it a lot as much as I can. But I hope more people, as the days go on, really start talking about the connection of Tren de Aragua, which is affiliated with the prison, but really they're affiliated with the Venezuelan regime over there. A lot of them are Hugo Chavez sympathizers. Even they go back before Maduro. These are terrorists. That's what they are. And why are they terrorists? Because they're working very closely with Hezbollah. And who is Hezbollah working with? Very closely with Iran. Iran knows that Hezbollah has this relationship with Venezuela. They've been established there. The DEA has done some tremendous work years ago with identifying Hezbollah working with the Mexican drug cartels. Why? Because it helps them finance their terrorist activities. They need the money. And so now they've made their way through South America into the Tren de Aragua, which we know how violent these guys are. They just, like you mentioned, they killed this guy, this immigration officer in Mexico, right on the other side of El Paso, Texas, by the way. And that happens to be their hub. And that the intel that I'm getting is that's where Tren de Aragua wants to come in through Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, Texas. And what they're doing is a lot of them are coming in, turning themselves in because they know that even if they put their fingerprints down in our system, they're going to come back negative, and they will actually allow them, believe it or not, until January 20th, they will be allowed to come in. Now, there's others that might have some kind of other criminal histories and other databases that they know, so they're coming in completely smuggled, undetected. That's a big issue down there right now. It's a big problem in El Paso and Juarez. They're seeing that. They're seeing the caravans that is another one, by the way, is on its way, mostly of Venezuelans, and they're broken up. They're broken up in what they call the ant operation in smaller groups of 80, 120. You're not going to see 1,200 people at once because they don't want that attention anymore. Their goal here is to make it inside the country of the U.S. before January 20th.
Victor, it's so infuriating when you think about how our federal government has allowed all this to happen. And I get it, it's under the Biden regime, and everyone thinks that on January 20th, it's going to be a brand new page for us. But to undo the damage that they've done over the last 4 years and pray that there's not a terrorist attack or any attacks. We just saw one on New Year's Day, which tells me that was a message sent to Americans that that's probably the first of many up their sleeve at this point. It's horrifying to think that they've subjected us to this level of just vulnerability, but it's not surprising given the Biden regime's history. And it's just really, it's got us all on edge. I mean, I hope President Trump is able to turn this around and help us out and make sure that we are safe and secure in this country. But he's got a lot of work and a lot to unpack. So we'll see. Victor, your final thoughts.
I'm going to say really quick, I'm glad you're saying that, because I know we all did our due diligence on November the 5th, and we voted President Trump in. But that doesn't mean that we get to go and sit on the couch now. This is so important that we need to help in our community as much as we can. It's going to be up to us. It's not over. It's only the beginning. So stay engaged, get even more engaged in your local community, because we are going to need the help of everyone, our local police and everyone, to help President Trump in the bigger picture when it comes to securing our neighborhoods, our nation, and of course, the foreign policy attached to it. It's going to be all up to all of us to do it.
Yeah, it is up to all of us to do it. And we all need to have our head on a swivel at this point and make sure we're on the lookout for things, because I have a bad feeling that they picked New Year's Day for a reason heading into 2025. So we'll see. Victor Avila, as always, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
The best part about this program is we get to pick who we allow to sponsor this show. And I only want to pick companies that believe in the same things that you and I both hold near and dear to our hearts. And that's why I've got a great product that I think you probably are already familiar with, but you got to check out because it's a great sale going on right now over at mypillow.com. Mike is having, and this is one of my favorites because you guys know I'm a big fan of those slippers. He's having his closeout sale on both the female and male slippers. And it's also the sandals as well. Make sure you use promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE at checkout. He's also got the bed sheets, the pillows. Everything's on sale with that promo code BRE. You guys, support a patriot who supports same things that you and I believe in. I mean, he literally fought, and they tried to bankrupt him for the election integrity issues that we truly do believe in. So if you haven't already done so, or if you need to buy someone a gift or a birthday gift, do it now. Head on over to mypillow.com and use promo code BRE. That's promo code BRE to save up to 66% off at checkout. Well, that does it for us on this Sunday edition on the Mel K Show. You guys, I love coming on Mel's channel and sharing my stories with all of you. Make sure, though, you don't miss out. Give my show page a follow. It's the Breanna Morello Show. We're also available as a podcast as well. So head on over Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all of your favorite podcasting platforms, and give us a follow there too. I'll catch you back here on Sunday morning